When 64-year-old Beatrice Johnson decided to work undercover as a night janitor at her own tech company, she expected to see how management treated lower-level employees. What she didn't expect was to be publicly humiliated by her own VP, who bet his salary that the uneducated cleaning lady couldn't even read a simple document. His reaction when she responded in perfect Mandarin, French, and German changed everything. Before we start this incredible story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate our story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Beatrice Johnson pulled her beat-up Honda Civic into the employee parking lot of TechFlow Solutions at exactly 11:47 p.m. The building looked different at night, darker, quieter, kind of lonely actually. She'd driven past this place a million times during the day when it was buzzing with her 847 employees, but she'd never seen it like this. At 64, Beatrice had built TechFlow from nothing into a $180 million software company. Started in her garage in 2003. Now they had offices in 12 cities. But lately she'd been hearing things, complaints from the cleaning crew about how they got treated, whispers about management being, well, assholes to the night staff. Problem was, whenever Beatrice showed up for her normal CEO visits, everybody kissed her ass. Yes, Ms. Johnson, everything's perfect, Ms. Johnson. She needed to see what really happened when nobody knew the boss was watching. So here she was, about to start her first night as Betty Washington, just another black cleaning lady trying to make ends meet. She'd spent weeks getting this right, bought clothes at Walmart instead of Nordstrom, practiced talking different, less polished, more regular. Even got a fake social security card and work permit through a guy her lawyer knew. Everything legal, just not under her real name. The night supervisor was Maria Santos, a tough-looking woman in her 50s who'd been running the cleaning crew for 8 years. Beatrice had never actually met her, which was perfect. "You Betty?" Maria asked, looking Beatrice up and down as she walked into the service entrance. "Yes, ma'am. Ready to work." "Good. We got 3 floors tonight." "You ever clean offices before?" "Some," Beatrice lied. Truth was, she hadn't cleaned anything in about 20 years. Had people for that. "All right, here's the deal. Floors 12, 15, and 18. Empty the trash, vacuum, wipe down surfaces, clean bathrooms. Don't touch nothing on the desks, just clean around it. These tech people get real pissy if you move their stuff." Maria handed her a cart loaded with supplies. "Questions? What about the people working late? There's always a few night owls. Stay out of their way, don't bother them, don't ask for nothing. They don't like talking to cleaning folks." Beatrice nodded, though inside she was already annoyed. These were her employees Maria was talking about. The elevator to the 12th floor felt weird. She'd been in it hundreds of times, but always going to the 20th floor where her corner office was. Now she was just staff. Floor 12 was mostly empty, just a few dim lights over the cubicles. Beatrice started with the trash cans, which was gross as hell. People threw away half-eaten food, used tissues, coffee cups with mold in them. How had she never thought about who had to deal with this crap? She was struggling with the industrial vacuum cleaner. Thing was heavy and kept getting tangled. When she heard voices from one of the conference rooms. Through the glass, she could see 3 people, all white, all men, all in expensive suits, despite it being almost midnight. She recognized 2 of them. Brad Morrison, her VP of Operations, and Kevin Zhang, head of international sales, the third guy she didn't know. "Telling you these overseas clients are pain in the ass," Brad was saying, loud enough that she could hear through the door. "Especially the Chinese ones. They act like they're doing us a favor." Kevin laughed. "That's why we charge them double. Let them think they're getting premium American service." Beatrice stopped vacuuming. This was news to her. She'd never authorized different pricing for international clients. "What about the cleaning lady?" the unknown guy asked, noticing Beatrice through the glass. Brad barely glanced her way. "Don't worry about her. They don't speak English anyway." "They don't speak English anyway." Beatrice felt her jaw clench. She had 3 degrees, spoke 5 languages, and had been running this company when Brad was still in college. But because she was pushing a vacuum cart, she didn't speak English. She kept cleaning but stayed close enough to listen. "The margins on the overseas contracts are insane," Kevin was saying. especially now that we're not providing the same level of support. Why waste resources on clients who'll never complain in decent English? Johnson would flip if she knew half the shit we pull, Brad said, referring to Beatrice like she was some distant authority figure instead of the woman currently emptying his trash can. Johnson's got no clue what happens in the real world, the third guy said. She sits in her ivory tower making feel-good policies while we do the actual work. Beatrice was gripping the vacuum handle so tight her knuckles hurt. She wanted to march in there and fire all three of them on the spot, but she forced herself to keep cleaning. Plus, she's so worried about diversity bullshit, she's probably never noticed if we're a little selective about who we hire for client-facing roles, Brad continued. What do you mean? The unknown guy asked. Let's just say our international sales team doesn't exactly reflect the demographics of Oakland, Kevin said with a smirk. They were talking about discrimination in her company, while she stood 10 feet away disguised as a cleaning lady. Beatrice finished the conference room area and moved on, but her mind was racing. In 30 minutes of eavesdropping, she'd learned that her executive team was overcharging international clients, providing substandard service, and possibly discriminating in hiring, all while talking about her like she was some out-of-touch figurehead. The rest of the 12th floor was empty, so she headed to 15. This floor had more late workers, mostly younger engineers staring at multiple monitors, energy drink cans everywhere. Most of them ignored her completely, which was fine. But as she was cleaning near the break room, she overheard another conversation that made her blood boil. Two young white guys, probably fresh out of college, were talking about their black co-worker. I'm just saying, Marcus only got promoted because of the diversity thing, one of them said. Totally, his code is mediocre at best, but Johnson's all about those diversity numbers. It's reverse racism, man. We work twice as hard, and Marcus gets the promotion because he's black. Beatrice wanted to tell these idiots that Marcus Williams was one of the most talented engineers in the company, and his promotion had been based purely on merit. But Betty the cleaning lady couldn't say that. Instead, she knocked over their trash can, accidentally making them jump. Sorry, she mumbled, bending to clean up the mess. Jesus, can't you people be more careful? One of them snapped. You people! Beatrice bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. Floor 18 was where things got really interesting. This was where the executive offices were, not hers but the VPs and directors, and apparently some of them were still working. As she approached the corner office, she could hear Brad Morrison's voice again. He was on a conference call with someone, speakerphone on. Look, the Chinese contract is worth $12 million to them, probably costs us $4 million to deliver. We just tell them our premium American engineers are working on it, then outsource the actual work to some code farm in Mumbai for pennies. Beatrice froze. This was fraud. Straight up, no question about it. What if Johnson finds out? A voice from the speaker asked. Johnson finds out what we want her to find out, Brad replied. She gets the quarterly reports, sees the revenue numbers. Everybody's happy. She doesn't need to know how the sausage gets made. And if a client complains, who they gonna complain to? Their English sucks and customer service just transfers them around until they give up. Beatrice was so angry she was shaking. This wasn't just about treating employees badly. Brad was actively defrauding clients and using racist assumptions to cover it up. She needed to get closer to hear more, but as she pushed her cart toward Brad's office, the wheels squeaked loudly. Brad looked up from his call. Hold on, he said to whoever was on the phone, then muted it. Excuse me. Beatrice looked up, trying to appear startled. You need to keep it down out there. This is a private conversation. Sorry, sir. Just trying to clean. Brad studied her for a moment, like he was seeing her for the first time. Then his expression shifted to something that made Beatrice's skin crawl. Actually, come here for a second. Beatrice approached his desk, heart pounding. She had no idea what he was about to do, but his tone made her nervous. You speak English pretty well, he said, which was such a backhanded compliment that Beatrice almost lost it. Little bit. Good. I want to test something. Brad picked up a document from his desk. It looked like a contract written in Chinese characters. My colleague here thinks cleaning staff are smarter than I give them credit for. So let's settle this. He held up the document. I'll give you my annual salary. That's $340,000, if you can tell me what this says." Beatrice stared at the paper. It was a software licensing agreement written in simplified Chinese. She could read every word of it perfectly, thanks to her degree in international business and the 2 years she'd spent working in Shanghai. But Betty, the cleaning lady, wasn't supposed to know that. Brad was smirking now, clearly enjoying what he thought was a harmless joke at the expense of the uneducated help. "Go ahead, take your time. Sound it out if you need to." The racist condescension in his voice was so thick it was almost a physical thing. Here was her own VP in her own company, publicly humiliating someone he thought was beneath him, using her ethnicity and job title to justify his cruelty. Beatrice looked at the document again, then at Brad's smug face. She thought about the fraud she'd just overheard, the discrimination against Marcus, the "you people" comment from the engineers. She was done being quiet. "This is a software licensing agreement," she said, in perfect, unaccented English. "Between TechFlow Solutions and Beijing Digital Systems, license term is 3 years renewable, with quarterly payments of 2.3 million yuan. Brad's smirk disappeared. "The agreement also specifies that all technical support will be provided by certified American engineers, not outsourced to third-party contractors in other countries." Now, Brad was going pale. "Which means," Beatrice continued, switching to fluent Mandarin, "that the conversation I just overheard about outsourcing this contract to Mumbai while lying to the client constitutes fraud." The person on the speakerphone was saying something, but Brad wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at Beatrice like she'd just sprouted wings. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. Beatrice smiled for the first time all night. She reached into her cleaning cart and pulled out her real driver's license, her corporate credit cards, and her business cards. "My name is Beatrice Johnson. I'm the founder and CEO of TechFlow Solutions. And Brad, you just offered to pay me $340,000 of my own money to prove that you're a racist piece of shit." Brad's face went through about 6 different shades of white before settling on a sickly green. "Also," Beatrice added, switching to French because she was feeling petty, "you're fired." The phone was still on, and whoever was on the other end was clearly trying to get Brad's attention, but Brad was frozen in his chair like a deer in headlights. Beatrice picked up the phone. "This is Beatrice Johnson, CEO of TechFlow. Whatever fraud you were just discussing with my former VP is cancelled. I'll be calling you tomorrow to discuss how we're going to make this right with our clients." She hung up and looked back at Brad, who finally found his voice. "Ms. Johnson, I can explain." "Actually, Brad, I don't think you can. But you're going to try. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., conference room A, you, Kevin, and whoever else was part of your little international scam. We're going to have a conversation about ethics, fraud, and what happens when you underestimate a cleaning lady." Beatrice started pushing her cart toward the elevator, then stopped. "Oh, and Brad, that $340,000 you offered me, I'm donating it to a scholarship fund for underprivileged students studying computer science, since you clearly think education is wasted on people like me." As the elevator doors closed on Brad's horrified face, Beatrice allowed herself a small smile. She'd gotten exactly what she came for, proof of what really happened when nobody thought she was watching. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day at TechFlow Solutions. Beatrice got about 3 hours of sleep before her alarm went off at 6 a.m. Her back hurt from pushing that damn cart around, and she had a stress headache from everything she'd discovered, but she also felt more energized than she had in months. Finally, she knew what was really happening in her own company. She made coffee in her actual kitchen, not the break room swill she'd seen the cleaning crew drinking, and started making phone calls. First call was to her head of HR, Janet Kim. "Janet, it's Beatrice. I need you in the office early today, like 7:30. Everything okay?" "Not really. We're going to have some terminations to process." "How many people are we talking about?" Beatrice thought about Brad, Kevin, and those 2 engineers making racist comments about Marcus. "At least 4. Maybe more. Jesus, what happened? I'll explain when you get there. Also, call Marcus Williams. I want him in that 9 a.m. meeting. The Marcus Williams who just got promoted to senior engineer? That's the one. Second call was to her lawyer, David Chen. David, I need you to look into something. Potential fraud in our international contracts. Specifically, clients being charged for American engineers but getting outsourced work from cheaper contractors. How potential are we talking? I have recorded conversations. Shit, okay, I'll be there in an hour. Third call was to her assistant, Rebecca. Rebecca, clear my schedule until noon. I've got some house cleaning to do. House cleaning? Beatrice looked at the cleaning supplies she'd left by her front door. Something like that. By 7:45, Beatrice was back in her real office on the 20th floor, wearing her usual power suit and feeling like herself again. The view from up here was incredible. You could see the whole Bay Area spread out below. Funny how different everything looked from 20 floors up versus the service hallways. Janet arrived first, looking nervous. Okay, what's the emergency? Beatrice handed her a list she'd written on the way in. I need you to pull the personnel files for these employees. Also, I want you to review our hiring practices for the international sales team. Specifically, look at the demographics. Janet scanned the list. Brad Morrison, he's VP of Operations. Not anymore. Beatrice, what the hell happened? I went undercover as a cleaning lady to see how management treats lower-level employees. Turns out, not great. Janet stared at her. You did what? Worked the night shift under a fake name, and I discovered that some of our executives are not only racist assholes, but they're also committing fraud. Holy shit. That's about right. David Chen arrived at 8:15 with a briefcase and a grim expression. Beatrice played him the recordings she'd made on her phone the night before. This is definitely fraud, he said after listening. The question is how widespread it is and how long it's been going on. What kind of liability are we looking at? Depends on the contracts and the damages. Could be anywhere from a few million to, well, a lot more than that. Great. At 8:45, Marcus Williams showed up looking confused and worried. He was a tall, thin black man in his early 30s, clearly nervous about being called to an unexpected meeting with the CEO. Ms. Johnson, Rebecca said you wanted to see me. Sit down, Marcus. I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest. Okay. Have you experienced discrimination here? From other employees or management? Marcus's expression got very careful. What do you mean? I mean, have people made comments about your race, your qualifications, or suggested that you only got promoted because of diversity initiatives? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Why are you asking? Because I heard some things last night that made me realize I've been out of touch with what's actually happening in my own company. Marcus looked around the office, then back at Beatrice. Can I speak freely? Please. Yes, I've heard comments. People saying I'm not qualified, that I only got promoted because I'm black. There's this assumption that any success I have is because of affirmative action, not because I'm good at my job. Who's making these comments? Mostly younger engineers, but also, Marcus hesitated. Also what? Also Brad Morrison. He's never said anything directly to me, but I've heard him talking to other managers about diversity hires and how we need to be careful not to lower our standards. Beatrice felt that familiar anger building again. Why didn't you come to me about this? Marcus gave her a look like she'd asked why water was wet. Ms. Johnson, with respect, you're the CEO. I'm a recent promotion who's already being called a diversity hire. If I start complaining about discrimination, what do you think happens to my career? He had a point. The power dynamics made it almost impossible for someone in Marcus's position to report discrimination without risking retaliation. Well, Beatrice said, I think your career is about to get a lot better. At exactly 9 a.m., Brad Morrison walked into conference room A, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Kevin Zhang was with him, plus 2 other managers that Beatrice didn't recognize. Good morning, gentlemen, Beatrice said from the head of the table. Please sit down. Brad took a seat as far from Beatrice as possible. Kevin looked confused about why he was there. Before we start, Beatrice continued, I want to introduce you to David Chen, our legal counsel, and Janet Kim from HR. They're here to witness this conversation and handle the administrative details. Administrative details for what? Kevin asked. Your termination. The room went dead silent. Ms. Johnson, Brad started, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Brad, last night you offered to pay me $340,000 to prove that I couldn't read a document written in Chinese. When I not only read it but explained that it described a contract you were planning to defraud, you seemed surprised. I didn't know you could. You didn't know I could read? Or you didn't know I was the CEO? Because both of those assumptions say some pretty ugly things about you. Brad's face was red now. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? I meant I didn't recognize you. Because I was dressed like a cleaning lady? Because you were working as a cleaning lady. So in your mind, CEOs can't work as cleaning ladies, or cleaning ladies can't be CEOs? Brad realized he was digging himself deeper. That's not... Kevin? Beatrice turned to the sales director. You were also part of the conversation about overcharging international clients and providing substandard service. You specifically talked about charging clients double while outsourcing their work to the cheapest contractors you could find. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That was hypothetical. The Beijing Digital Systems contract is hypothetical. No, but the Mumbai outsourcing is hypothetical. Ms. Johnson, we're just trying to maximize profits by committing fraud. David Chen leaned forward. Gentlemen, I've reviewed the contracts in question. What you're describing violates the specific terms of service that clients are paying for. That's not profit maximization. It's breach of contract and potentially criminal fraud. The two managers Beatrice didn't recognize were looking panicked now. Who are you two? She asked. I'm Tom Rodriguez, International Accounts Manager, the first one said. This is Mike Johnson, Client Relations. And what's your role in this scheme? Tom and Mike looked at each other. We just do what Brad tells us to do, which is process the international contracts and handle client complaints. How do you handle client complaints? Mike shifted uncomfortably. We have a process. What kind of process? If clients call with technical issues, we transfer them around until they give up or accept a partial refund. Because you assume they can't communicate effectively in English. Because Brad said international clients are more trouble than they're worth, Tom said, apparently deciding to throw his boss under the bus. Beatrice looked at Brad. Is that true? I never said they weren't worth it. You said their English sucks and they'll give up if you transfer them around enough. I was frustrated. You were racist. That's not... Brad, here's the thing. I speak 5 languages. I have an MBA from Stanford and a degree in international business from Berkeley. I've lived in Shanghai, worked in 12 countries, and built this company from nothing into a $180 million business. She stood up. But last night, because I was dressed like a cleaning lady, you assumed I was uneducated, probably couldn't speak English well, and definitely couldn't read Chinese. Ms. Johnson, I made a mistake. You made a series of mistakes. You assumed my intelligence based on my job title. You assumed my education based on my appearance. You committed fraud against our international clients based on racist assumptions about their ability to complain effectively. Beatrice walked around the table. But your biggest mistake was thinking that the CEO of a company couldn't figure out what was happening in her own building. She stopped behind Brad's chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're fired. Effective immediately. Kevin, you're fired. Tom and Mike, you're on probation while we figure out how deep this goes. You can't fire me without cause, Brad said, finally finding some fight. David, explain to Brad what at-will employment means. It means she can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, David said. But in this case, she has documented evidence of fraud, discrimination, and breach of fiduciary duty. You'd be lucky if she doesn't press criminal charges. Brad's face went white. Criminal charges? The Beijing contract alone represents $12 million in potential damages, David continued. If the pattern extends to other international clients, we're looking at felony fraud. I was just trying to increase profits. By lying to clients about the services they were paying for, Beatrice said. That's fraud, Brad. And using racist assumptions to justify it doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. Janet had been taking notes throughout the meeting. What about severance packages? None, Beatrice said. Termination for cause. Ms. Johnson, Kevin spoke up for the first time in 10 minutes. I have a mortgage. Kids in college. You should have thought about that before you decided to defraud our clients. We were just following orders. Whose orders? Kevin looked at Brad, who was staring at the table. Let me ask you something, Kevin, Beatrice continued. Did anyone order you to make racist comments about our clients? Did anyone order you to provide substandard service based on their nationality? No, but those were your choices, and choices have consequences. Beatrice sat back down. Here's what happens next. David is going to investigate every international contract from the past 2 years. We're going to contact every affected client, explain what happened, and make full restitution. That could bankrupt the company, Brad said. No, Brad. Your fraud could bankrupt the company. I'm trying to save it. She turned to Janet. I want a full review of our hiring practices, particularly in client-facing roles. I also want mandatory bias training for all management-level employees. What about the engineering team? Janet asked. What about them? I heard you mention some issues there too. Beatrice had almost forgotten about the 2 engineers making racist comments about Marcus. Right. There were a couple of engineers making inappropriate comments about diversity hiring. I'll deal with them separately. Marcus, who had been quiet through the whole meeting, finally spoke up. Ms. Johnson, can I say something? Of course. This company is better than this. Most people here are good people doing good work. But when management doesn't address discrimination, it creates a culture where people think it's okay. He looked directly at Brad. I've been putting up with comments about my qualifications for 2 years, not because I'm not good enough, but because people need someone to blame for their own insecurities. You're absolutely right, Beatrice said, and that changes today. She stood up again. This meeting is over. Brad, Kevin, you have 30 minutes to clear out your offices. Tom, Mike, you'll be hearing from HR about new job expectations and training requirements. As the room cleared out, David Chen hung back. This is going to be expensive, he said. How expensive? Depends on how many contracts are affected and whether any clients decide to sue. But we're looking at millions. Beatrice nodded. Better than the alternative, which is continuing to be a company that discriminates against employees and defrauds clients. That would cost us everything. As David left, Beatrice walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. She could see Brad and Kevin loading boxes into their cars, their careers at TechFlow officially over. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Thank you for listening and for caring enough to find out what was really happening. That made everything worth it. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding TechFlow into the company she'd always intended it to be. Today she was just proud that she'd had the courage to see her business through someone else's eyes. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're willing to get your hands dirty. Word spread fast in a tech company. By noon, everyone knew that Brad Morrison and Kevin Zhang had been fired, though the official story was just personnel changes. The rumor mill was working overtime trying to figure out what had happened. Beatrice spent the morning in back-to-back meetings with Janet, David, and her CFO, trying to figure out how much damage Brad's scheme had caused. The numbers weren't pretty. We've identified at least 15 international contracts that were affected, Janet reported. Total value of about $47 million. How much did we actually spend on service delivery versus what we charged? About $11 million, so we pocketed $36 million by providing substandard service. Jesus, Beatrice rubbed her temples. David, what's our legal exposure? Best case scenario, we make full restitution and avoid lawsuits. Worst case, clients sue for damages beyond just the service fees. We could be looking at $100 million or more. And if word gets out about the discrimination? That's harder to quantify, but reputation damage in the tech industry can be fatal, especially for a company that markets itself as progressive and inclusive. Beatrice's phone buzzed with another message, this one from Maria Santos, the night cleaning supervisor. Betty, you okay? Brad Morrison just left with boxes. People saying he got fired. She'd forgotten that Betty was supposed to show up for work tonight. She texted back, I'm fine. Won't be coming in anymore. Got a better opportunity. Thanks for everything. Too bad. You were a good worker. Hope new job treats you better. If only Maria knew. At 2 p.m., Beatrice called an all-hands meeting. The main conference room was packed with curious employees trying to figure out what was going on. I know there's been speculation about the personnel changes today, she began. I want to address that directly. She looked around the room, noting the mix of anxiety and curiosity on people's faces. This morning, I terminated several employees for serious violations of company policy and ethics. I can't get into specifics due to legal considerations, but I can tell you that these violations included discrimination and fraudulent business practices. Murmurs rippled through the room. I know this is unsettling. Nobody likes uncertainty at work, but I want you to understand why these actions were necessary. Beatrice paused, thinking about how much to reveal about her undercover work. Over the past few weeks, I've been conducting an investigation into how our company culture and practices align with our stated values. What I discovered was deeply troubling. She spotted Marcus in the crowd and made eye contact. I learned that some employees have been experiencing discrimination and harassment that went unreported because they didn't feel safe coming forward. I learned that some managers were engaging in fraudulent practices that put our client relationships and company reputation at risk. The room was dead silent now. This is unacceptable. TechFlow was built on principles of innovation, integrity, and inclusion. When we fail to live up to those principles, we fail as a company. Beatrice stepped out from behind the podium. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're implementing new policies for reporting discrimination and harassment, anonymous reporting, external investigation processes, and protection against retaliation. Second, all management employees will undergo mandatory training on bias, discrimination, and ethical business practices. Third, we're conducting a comprehensive review of our client service practices to ensure we're delivering the quality and value that our customers deserve. A hand went up in the crowd. Sarah Kim, one of the junior developers. Ms. Johnson, does this mean there will be more layoffs? No. The people we terminated today were removed for cause, not for financial reasons. In fact, we're going to be hiring additional staff to properly service our international clients. Another hand. What about the projects Brad was managing? Those will be redistributed among existing staff and new hires. Nobody's workload is going to become unmanageable. Marcus raised his hand. Ms. Johnson, you mentioned employees who experienced discrimination. What kind of support will they receive? Good question. We're establishing an employee assistance program that includes counseling services, legal support, and career development resources. Anyone who has experienced discrimination or harassment will have access to these services. After the meeting, Beatrice's assistant Rebecca cornered her in the hallway. Okay, what really happened? Brad Morrison has been here for 8 years. You don't just fire a VP without a major reason. Beatrice looked around to make sure they were alone. Can you keep a secret? Always. I spent 3 nights working undercover as a cleaning lady to see how employees treat the night staff. Rebecca's jaw dropped. You did what? I posed as a janitor named Betty Washington, and I discovered that Brad was not only a racist asshole, but he was also defrauding our international clients. Holy shit. That's what I said. Wait, so you were actually cleaning toilets? Among other things, do you know how disgusting the men's room on the 15th floor is? I can imagine. But Beatrice, that's insane. You could have just hired investigators. I tried that. They came back with reports that everything was fine. Turns out people act differently when they think the boss might be watching. Rebecca shook her head. Only you would go undercover in your own company. It was worth it. I learned more about TechFlow in 3 nights than I had in the previous 3 years. That afternoon, Beatrice got a call from her biggest competitor, Alex Chen at TechFlow Solutions. Heard you had some personnel changes today, Alex said without preamble. Word travels fast. Brad Morrison just called asking if we had any openings for a VP of operations. And? I told him we'd get back to him. But I'm curious. Why'd you let him go? Beatrice had known Alex for 15 years. They competed fiercely but respected each other. Let's just say Brad's management style wasn't compatible with our company values. That's code for something. It's code for you probably don't want to hire him. Discrimination, among other things. Thanks for the heads up. I'll pass on Mr. Morrison. Good choice. At 6 p.m., Beatrice was finally alone in her office, looking over the damage assessment reports. The financial hit would be significant, but not fatal. The bigger challenge would be rebuilding client trust and internal culture. Her phone rang. Maria Santos. Ms. Johnson? This is Maria from the cleaning crew. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Not at all, Maria. What can I do for you? It's about Betty Washington, the woman who worked with us this week. Beatrice's heart skipped. What about her? She told me she got a better job, but I'm worried about her. She seemed different, like she was dealing with something heavy. Different how? Smart. Really smart. Asked good questions, noticed things other people miss, and she was angry about something but trying to hide it. Angry about what? I don't know exactly. But I've been doing this job for 8 years, and I can tell when someone's watching how people treat us. Betty was paying attention to everything, how the day staff talked to us, how management acted when they thought we couldn't understand. Beatrice felt a lump in her throat. And what did she see? The same shit we always see, excuse my language. People treating us like we're invisible or stupid or don't belong here. But Betty, she looked like it was breaking her heart. Maria paused. I think maybe she used to have a better job, and something happened. Maybe she needed the work but wasn't used to being treated like dirt. Why are you telling me this? Because after Brad Morrison got fired today, I started thinking. Betty disappeared the same day he got canned, and I heard Morrison was discriminating against people. Beatrice's pulse quickened. What did you hear? That he was saying racist stuff, treating black employees bad. And I'm wondering if maybe Betty reported something and that's why she left. What makes you think that? Because on her last night, I saw her near Morrison's office when he was having some meeting. She looked upset when she came back to the supply closet. Maria's voice got quieter. Ms. Johnson, I know you probably don't think about people like us much, but we see everything, we hear things, and sometimes we know stuff that might be important. Like what? Like the fact that Morrison and his buddies think they're better than everyone else. Like how they treat the maintenance staff like we're stupid. Like how they make jokes about diversity hires and affirmative action when they think nobody's listening. Beatrice closed her eyes. Maria, how long has this been going on? Years. But it's gotten worse lately. Morrison's been talking about cleaning house and getting rid of dead weight. That made us nervous, you know. Has anyone ever reported this? Who would we report it to? Morrison was the VP. Human Resources reports to him, and us janitors complaining about executives. Come on. Maria was right. The power dynamics made it almost impossible for cleaning staff to report discrimination from management. Maria, what if I told you that things are going to change around here? I'd say I hope so, but I've heard that before. This time is different. Why? Beatrice took a deep breath. Because this time the person who witnessed the discrimination has the power to do something about it. What do you mean? I mean, Betty Washington is going to make sure that every employee at this company, janitors, engineers, executives, everyone, gets treated with respect. How's she going to do that? You'll see. After hanging up with Maria, Beatrice sat in her office thinking about the conversation. The cleaning staff had been watching everything, hearing everything, but had no voice to report what they witnessed. She picked up her phone and called Janet in HR. Janet, I need you to set up a meeting with all the custodial and maintenance staff. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. All of them? That's like 20 people. All of them. And I want it in the main conference room, not some back office. What's this about? I want to hear what they've been seeing and hearing while they clean our offices. Beatrice, are you sure that's a good idea? If they start making accusations, then we'll investigate the accusations. Janet, these people see everything that happens in this building after hours. They probably know more about our company culture than I do. The next morning brought more bad news. David Chen called with an update on the international contracts. I talked to our contact at Beijing Digital Systems. They're pissed, but they're willing to negotiate rather than sue if we make full restitution and guarantee better service going forward. That's good news. The bad news is that 2 other clients have already filed complaints with their local business authorities. The Hamburg tech group is threatening to go public with their story. What do they want? Complete refund of all payments, plus damages for the business impact of receiving substandard service. How much? $8. $2 million plus whatever the business impact damages end up being. Beatrice winced. What about criminal charges? Still a possibility. The Beijing authorities are reviewing the contracts to determine if criminal fraud charges are warranted. Against the company or individuals? Both, potentially. Brad Morrison could be looking at international fraud charges. At 3 p.m., Beatrice walked into the main conference room to find 22 custodial and maintenance workers sitting around the table looking nervous and confused. Most of them had never been in this room before. Maria Santos was there, looking suspicious about why she'd been called to meet with the CEO. "Thank you all for coming," Beatrice began. "I know this is unusual, but I need your help with something important." She looked around the room at faces that were mostly black and Latino, people who kept her building clean and functioning, but who she rarely interacted with. "I've recently learned that some managers in this company have been treating employees disrespectfully, particularly employees in support roles like yourselves." A few people shifted uncomfortably. "I want to know what you've seen and heard while doing your jobs. I want to know if anyone has made inappropriate comments about your intelligence, your background, or your right to be here." The room was silent. "I also want to know if you've witnessed discrimination against other employees, engineers, sales staff, anyone." Still silence. Maria finally spoke up. "Ms. Johnson, with respect, why are you asking us this?" "Because I think you see things that I don't see. I think you hear conversations that happen when people think nobody important is listening. And what happens if we tell you stuff you don't want to hear? Then I deal with the stuff I don't want to hear." An older black man named James Washington raised his hand. "Ms. Johnson, I've been cleaning offices for 30 years. Most executives don't even know my name." "What's your name?" "James Washington." "Nice to meet you, James. What have you seen here that concerns you?" James looked around at his co-workers, then back at Beatrice. "You sure you want to know?" "I'm sure." "All right." Morrison and his friends talk about employees like they're discussing livestock. This one's smart but uppity. That one's good but needs to know his place. We need to be careful about the diversity hires getting too comfortable. You heard Morrison say these things? Multiple times, usually late at night when they're working on deals. A Latina woman named Carmen Rodriguez spoke up. "They also make jokes about our English, like we can't understand what they're saying." "What kind of jokes?" "They'll say stuff like the cleaning lady probably thinks we're talking about her, or good thing Maria doesn't understand business talk." Maria looked angry. "They assume we're stupid because we clean toilets for a living." "Have any of them ever said anything directly to you?" "Morrison once asked me if I understood what confidential meant," Maria said, "like I might go gossiping about his precious business meetings." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I had a college degree and understood the concept of discretion." He looked shocked. James chuckled. "Maria's got an accounting degree from San Jose State. She's probably more qualified to handle company finances than half the executives here." Beatrice stared at Maria. "You have an accounting degree?" "Bachelor's degree. Graduated summa cum laude. But accounting firms don't hire black women with names like Maria Santos. Cleaning companies do." "Why didn't you apply for an accounting position here?" "I did 3 years ago. Got an interview with Morrison's department. He took one look at me and said the position required strong analytical skills and maybe I'd be more comfortable in a support role." Beatrice felt her anger building again. "He said that to you directly?" "Direct quote." "Did you report it?" Maria laughed bitterly. "Report it to who?" Morrison was the VP in charge of hiring for financial positions. An idea was forming in Beatrice's mind. "Maria, would you be interested in an accounting position now?" "Are you serious?" Dead serious. We're going to need someone to help audit our international contracts and handle client restitution, someone with accounting skills and the intelligence to understand complex financial arrangements. You'd hire me based on this conversation? I'd hire you based on your qualifications and the fact that you've been watching this company's operations for 3 years with a trained eye. Maria looked around at her co-workers, then back at Beatrice. What about my cleaning job? We'll promote someone else into your supervisory role and hire additional staff. This company owes you more than a lateral move. Other hands started going up around the room. Ms. Johnson, said a young black man named Kevin Brown. I have an engineering degree, but I've been working maintenance because I couldn't get interviews at tech companies. What kind of engineering? Computer science from UC Berkeley. But with a name like Kevin Brown and no family connections, I ended up fixing computers instead of programming them. Beatrice looked at Janet, who was frantically taking notes. Kevin, would you be interested in talking to our engineering department about openings? You serious? I'm serious about giving qualified people opportunities they should have had years ago. By the end of the meeting, Beatrice had identified 3 cleaning staff members with college degrees, 2 with technical skills that could be useful in other departments, and 1 with language skills that would be valuable for international client relations. More importantly, she had a clearer picture of just how deep the discrimination problem went at TechFlow. As the meeting broke up, Maria hung back. Ms. Johnson, can I ask you something? Of course. What changed? Why are you suddenly interested in what the cleaning crew has to say? Beatrice smiled. Let's just say I recently got a different perspective on what it's like to work the night shift. Betty Washington tell you some stories? You could say that. Maria studied her face. You know, Betty reminded me of someone, but I could never figure out who. Really? Yeah. Something about the way she carried herself, like she was used to being in charge, but was pretending not to be. Beatrice's heart was pounding. What made you think that? The way she watched everything, the way she asked questions, and the way she got so angry when people were disrespectful. Maria paused. Most people who clean offices for a living, we're used to being treated like dirt. It's just part of the job. But Betty looked like she'd never been treated that way before, and it was killing her. Maybe Betty had a good reason to be angry. Maybe she did. As Maria headed for the door, she turned back one more time. Ms. Johnson, if you ever talk to Betty again, tell her something for me. What's that? Tell her that whatever she saw here, whatever made her so upset, it mattered. Because things are finally changing. Beatrice felt tears in her eyes. I'll make sure she gets the message. That night, Beatrice sat in her car in the TechFlow parking lot, looking up at the building where she'd spent 3 nights discovering the truth about her own company. Tomorrow, she'd start implementing the changes that would make TechFlow the company she'd always intended it to be. But tonight, she just wanted to remember what it felt like to see her business through Betty Washington's eyes. Sometimes the most important lessons come from pretending to be someone else long enough to understand what you've become. 2 weeks after her undercover experience, Beatrice was dealing with the fallout from Brad Morrison's schemes while trying to rebuild TechFlow's culture. The financial damage was worse than they'd initially calculated, $73 million in fraudulent contracts, with potential damages reaching $150 million if all the affected clients sued. But there was also unexpected good news. Maria Santos had started her new position as financial auditor and was already identifying inefficiencies that could save the company money. Kevin Brown had impressed the engineering team so much during his interview that they'd offered him a senior developer position. 2 other former custodial staff had been moved into roles that better matched their skills. The real test came when Brad Morrison's replacement was announced. Beatrice had promoted Marcus Williams to VP of Operations, making him the youngest VP in company history and the first black executive on the senior leadership team. The reaction was mixed. You sure about this? David Chen asked during their weekly legal update. Marcus is qualified, but promoting him right after firing Brad for discrimination might look like overcorrection. To who? To employees who think you're prioritizing diversity over merit. Marcus has been managing complex technical projects for 3 years. His teams consistently outperform their targets, and his peers respect him. How is that not merit? I'm just saying some people might see it differently. Then those people need better education about what merit actually looks like. That afternoon, Beatrice got a call from an unknown number. "Ms. Johnson, this is Jennifer Walsh from Tech Insider magazine. I'm calling about reports that TechFlow recently terminated several executives for discriminatory practices. Would you like to comment?" Beatrice's blood went cold. "How did you hear about that?" "We received an anonymous tip from someone claiming to have inside knowledge of systematic discrimination at your company. They also mentioned something about fraudulent international contracts. I can't comment on personnel matters." "What about the fraud allegations?" "I can't comment on ongoing legal matters either." "Ms. Johnson, we're going to run this story with or without your input. It would be better for everyone if you provided your perspective." After hanging up, Beatrice immediately called David Chen. "We've got a problem. Tech Insider magazine is running a story about the discrimination and fraud issues." "Shit. How much do they know?" "Enough to be dangerous. Someone gave them inside information." "Any idea who?" "Brad Morrison would be my first guess. Revenge for being fired." "Can we get an injunction to stop publication?" "Probably not. And trying to suppress the story would just make us look guilty. So, what do? We get ahead of it. Full transparency, take responsibility, show what we're doing to fix the problems." That evening, Beatrice worked late preparing a press statement. She was interrupted by a knock on her office door. "Come in." It was Marcus Williams, looking nervous. "Miss Johnson, do you have a minute?" "Always. What's on your mind?" Marcus sat down across from her desk. "I heard about the magazine story. Word travels fast. I wanted to talk to you about my promotion." "What about it?" "Some people are saying you only promoted me because you needed a black VP after firing Brad for discrimination." Beatrice sighed. "And what do you think?" "I think my promotion is going to be scrutinized more than any other VP's has ever been. Every decision I make, every project that succeeds or fails, will be seen through the lens of whether I deserved the job." "You're probably right. How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, it pisses me off. I've been doing VP-level work for 2 years without the title or the pay. But now that I have both, people assume it's charity." Marcus leaned forward. "But I also know that if I let that anger distract me from doing good work, it proves their point. So I'm going to be the best VP this company has ever had, not to prove I deserved the promotion, but to prove that merit has nothing to do with what people look like." Beatrice smiled. "That's exactly why I promoted you. Because I'm going to work twice as hard as everyone else? Because you understand that leadership isn't about being perfect, it's about being accountable. And because you're not going to let other people's prejudices define your performance." The Tech Insider story ran 3 days later with the headline, "Tech Company Fires Executives After Discrimination, Investigation Exposes Culture of Bias and Fraud." The article was devastating. It detailed Brad Morrison's racist comments, the international contract fraud, and the systematic discrimination against employees of color. It also revealed that the CEO had conducted an undercover investigation by working as a cleaning lady. By noon, the story had been picked up by major news outlets. Beatrice's phone was ringing non-stop with interview requests. The employee reaction was swift and divided. Some praised Beatrice for taking action against discrimination. Others criticized her for going undercover instead of trusting existing management systems. The most vocal criticism came from an unexpected source, a group of white engineers who felt that Marcus's promotion was unfair reverse discrimination. They sent a letter to HR demanding that all recent promotions and hirings be reviewed for racial bias in favor of minorities. Janet Kim brought the letter to Beatrice's office looking frustrated. 15 engineers signed this, she said, including some senior developers. Beatrice read the letter, which claimed that TechFlow was now overcorrecting for past discrimination by unfairly favoring Black and Latino employees. "What do you want to do?" Janet asked. I want to meet with these engineers, all of them, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Are you sure that's a good idea? Janet, if we don't address this head-on, it's going to fester. Better to have an uncomfortable conversation now than a hostile work environment later. The meeting was tense from the start. 15 engineers, all white, all male, except for 2 women, sat around the conference table looking defensive. I read your letter, Beatrice began. I want to understand your concerns. A senior developer named Ryan Martinez spoke first. Ms. Johnson, we're not racist, but we're concerned that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. What do you mean? Marcus Williams got promoted to VP after 3 years. Most of us have been here longer without getting senior leadership opportunities. Marcus was promoted because he was the best candidate for the job. What makes you think his race was a factor? The timing, said another engineer, Sarah Kim. Right after you fired Brad for discrimination, you promote a black employee to replace him. It looks like you're checking a box. Sarah, do you know Marcus's qualifications? I know he's smart, but do you know his track record, his project success rate, his team management scores? No, but then how can you evaluate whether his promotion was merit-based if you don't know his merits? Ryan jumped back in. Ms. Johnson, we're just asking for fairness. We want promotions to be based on qualifications, not demographics. Ryan, show me one promotion in this company's history that you've questioned based on qualifications. What do you mean? I mean, when Brad Morrison was promoted to VP 5 years ago, did you write a letter asking for review of his qualifications? When Kevin Zhang became sales director, did you demand an audit of the hiring process? The room was quiet. Or is this the first time you've been concerned about promotion fairness, and it just happens to coincide with a black employee getting promoted? That's not fair, Sarah protested. We're not questioning Marcus because he's black. Then why are you questioning him? Because the circumstances are suspicious. What circumstances? That I fired a VP for fraud and discrimination and then promoted the most qualified candidate to replace him? Beatrice stood up. Let me ask you something else. How many of you have ever been mistaken for janitors while wearing business casual clothes? No hands went up. How many of you have had your credit cards examined extra carefully when making business purchases? No hands. How many of you have been asked if you're sure you can afford something when booking business travel? Still no hands. Marcus deals with that stuff regularly. Maria Santos, who has an accounting degree, was told she didn't have the analytical skills for a financial position and should stick to support roles. Kevin Brown, who has a computer science degree from Berkeley, was fixing computers instead of programming them because no one would interview him for engineering positions. Beatrice walked around the table. You're worried about reverse discrimination, but you've been working in a company where regular discrimination was so normal that you didn't even notice it. But we didn't create that discrimination, Ryan said. Why should we be penalized for it? You're not being penalized. You're being asked to compete on equal terms for the first time. Sarah looked frustrated. Ms. Johnson, with respect, it feels like being white is now a disadvantage here. Sarah, let me tell you what disadvantage actually looks like. Disadvantage is being the most qualified person in the room and having people assume you got your job through affirmative action. Disadvantage is being interrupted in meetings more often than your colleagues. Disadvantage is having to work twice as hard to get the same recognition. Beatrice sat back down. You know what your actual disadvantage is? For the first time in your careers, you're going to be judged primarily on your performance instead of benefiting from unconscious bias that favored people who looked like you. The room was uncomfortable quiet. Here's what's going to happen, Beatrice continued. We're implementing blind performance reviews where evaluators don't know the race or gender of the employees they're assessing. We're also requiring diverse interview panels for all senior positions. What if that means fewer white employees get promoted? Ryan asked. Then it means our previous promotion process was biased in favor of white employees, and we're correcting that. As the engineers filed out, most looking unhappy, Sarah Kim hung back. Ms. Johnson, can I ask you something privately? Of course. Do you really think I've benefited from being white? Sarah, do you think you've ever been held back by being white? No. Do you think Marcus has ever been held back by being black? Sarah thought for a moment. Probably. Then yes, you've benefited from being white. Not because anyone gave you special treatment, but because you never had to overcome racial barriers that other qualified people faced. Sarah nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. Most people don't, because they don't have to. That's part of the privilege. That evening, Beatrice got a call from Alex Chen at Silicon Solutions. Saw the Tech Insider article. Pretty brutal. Could be worse. How? We could still be the company that was described in the article instead of the company that's fixing those problems. Fair point. How are you handling the fallout? Taking responsibility, making changes, and hoping our clients and employees judge us by our actions going forward rather than our mistakes in the past. And if they don't, then we'll deal with that too. As Beatrice hung up, she realized that the hardest part of the whole experience wasn't discovering the discrimination. It was helping people understand why changing it was necessary. But for the first time since her nights as Betty Washington, she felt optimistic about TechFlow's future. The company was finally becoming what she'd always intended it to be, a place where everyone's contributions were valued, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. Sometimes the most important changes require the most difficult conversations. The annual TechFlow company meeting was held in the same auditorium where Beatrice had announced Brad Morrison's termination a year earlier. But the energy in the room was completely different. Maria Santos, now Director of Financial Operations, was presenting the year-end financial report. Despite the $89 million in client restitution payments, TechFlow had ended the year profitable thanks to improved efficiency and several major new contracts. Our client satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, Maria reported. Turns out, when you actually deliver the services people pay for, they're willing to pay premium prices. The audience laughed. Maria had developed a reputation for dry humor and brutal honesty about business practices. Kevin Brown, now Senior Engineering Manager, presented on the new products his team had developed. We've launched 3 new software platforms this year, all developed by our expanded engineering team that includes talent we previously overlooked. Marcus Williams, 1 year into his VP role, had exceeded every performance metric. His operations department had streamlined international client service, eliminated the outsourcing fraud, and built genuine partnerships with overseas companies. But the biggest change was cultural. The anonymous reporting system had generated dozens of complaints in the first few months, most of which were handled through training and policy clarification rather than termination. The bias training program had become a model that other tech companies were copying. After the meeting, Beatrice walked through the building that had been the site of her undercover investigation. The night cleaning crew was starting their shift, but now they were treated as valued employees rather than invisible service providers. She stopped by the 18th floor, where Brad Morrison's old office had been converted into a collaboration space for the international sales team. Through the glass walls, she could see a diverse group of employees working on client presentations in multiple languages. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Johnson, this is James Washington from the custodial staff. Wanted you to know my son just got accepted to UC Berkeley Engineering Program with the scholarship TechFlow sponsored. Betty Washington would be proud. Beatrice smiled. The Betty Washington Scholarship Fund, established with the $340,000 that Brad had mockingly offered to Bet, had already helped 12 students from underprivileged backgrounds pursue technical degrees. She texted back, "Tell your son congratulations. And tell him that hard work and talent matter more than what other people assume about his potential." As she headed home, Beatrice reflected on everything that had changed since her 3 nights as a cleaning lady. TechFlow was more profitable, more innovative, and more equitable than it had ever been. The discrimination lawsuit that 3 former employees had filed had been settled out of court, with the plaintiffs praising the company's transformation. Most importantly, she had learned that leadership wasn't about being above the people you lead. It was about being willing to see your organization from their perspective. The cleaning cart that had started this whole journey was now displayed in the lobby, with a plaque that read, "Sometimes the most important insights come from the most unexpected perspectives. Betty Washington." Employees often asked who Betty Washington was, And Beatrice would tell them she was someone who reminded her that every job has dignity, every person deserves respect, and every leader should be willing to walk in their employees' shoes. What she didn't tell them was that Betty Washington had taught her the most important lesson of her career. You can't fix problems you're not willing to see, and you can't see problems from the top floor. Sometimes the best view of your company comes from the night shift. What did you think of Beatrice's bold decision to work undercover in her own company? Her story shows us that real leadership means being willing to discover uncomfortable truths about your organization, even when those discoveries force you to confront your own blind spots. Beatrice's journey reminds us that discrimination often happens in small, daily interactions that people in power never witness. This powerful tale demonstrates that change isn't just about firing bad actors. It's about creating systems and cultures that prevent discrimination from taking root in the first place. Leave your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 0 to 10. Have you ever experienced workplace discrimination? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to hear more incredible stories about people who fought for justice and equality in their workplaces. Check out more inspiring stories about courage and accountability right here on the screen.